What is up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. It is so great to be back here. It feels like it has been forever, probably because so much has happened so far in less than a week. So I'm not going to waste too much time on the intro, but I hope you guys have enjoyed your WrestleMania week so far and the fallout since then and what we have coming up, and of course AEW Dynamite. But today's show is just going to be focused on WWE news and, of course, the WrestleMania Night 1 and Night 2, and a little bit of Monday Night Raw and some Cody Rhodes news after that. So I'm not going to waste too much time, like I said, but I hope you guys enjoyed WrestleMania. For me, I was watching it on delay, of course. I finally finished watching it officially this morning. It was, I think I started it yesterday afternoon and was able to finish it this morning just with a little bit of some flight delays and all that good stuff. But the whole experience itself, I think they really did a great job this year. I think if you were a fan live in attendance, I think you probably had a good time. And that's the whole point, right? And the whole stupendous tagline going into it, I think they definitely had their moments that lived up to the hype and maybe even exceeded our expectations going into it, which we'll definitely pinpoint and kind of break that down and focus on what I think, in my opinion, kind of either stole the show or maybe, like I said, exceeded my expectation going into it. And I will admit when I was wrong, and I will be admitting that in a little bit here. But as always, feel free, I'm going to get this out of the way so we can get into the show itself. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at ASHMANNS. And for the show, the Twitter handle is at kickashpod_. Definitely feel free to follow me on there and let me know what you guys thought of WrestleMania. I have seen a lot of your guys' thoughts and listened to a couple of your guys' podcasts already out there, so I know what a lot of you guys have been thinking about, and we, of course, with this being so, 4 or 5-ish days after the fact, we have some fallout from that, which would be kind of cool to tie into the card itself too, but it's, I don't know, it was a very good WrestleMania. I think if I had to rate the overall show itself, I would say maybe like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe even an 8. Maybe an 8, yeah, maybe officially an 8, but definitely no lower than a 7.5, because I think, in my opinion, Night 1 kind of stole the whole event, and I think as a whole, Night 1 was such a phenomenal show, and I think, kind of looking back at it, it was definitely the wrestling heavy and the wrestling centric show. So if you're more into that, which I guess I am, I think you would have enjoyed Night 1 a little bit more than Night 2. Now, I'm not saying everything was perfect in Night 1 or Night 2 for that matter, but it was just a good show. And I think Night 2 was pretty much anchored, and the focus point going into it was the main event, which should be the point, and not faulting that at all or saying that's a negative, but more so than Night 1, Night 2 is held by the main event, that of course being Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, but we'll definitely be getting into that a little bit later. So like I said, I'm not going to waste too much time. We are going to officially start with WrestleMania Night 1. We had country music singer Brantley Gilbert singing the America the Beautiful song, and to be honest, I hadn't really heard of him going into it. It was fine, I guess. I'm not really a big country music fan, but you know, it was what it was. It's fine. It was cool though. They played a video package for WrestleMania going into the show itself that was narrated by Mark Wahlberg, and he looked phenomenal, it was always cool seeing him and knowing he's a big fan. Just a pretty good grab by WWE in my opinion. But getting into the card itself, we started off with the Usos, Jimmy and Jay, your tag team champions on SmackDown, defending against Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs for the, of course, SmackDown Tag Team Championships. This match, of course, it seems to be cut short. I think this one maybe went under 8 minutes, 7 minutes. I would be surprised if it went over that. And that, of course, being due to the injury to Rick Boogs. And it was just so sad to see. And the second his knee buckled, I just cringed, man. You just knew that something seriously wrong when it happened there, and especially with the way that he went. And I think maybe one of the ideas going into it where they were going to play up his knee injury, since they had been focusing on that storyline wise going into it, and if that, I think a lot of us was hoping that was the case at first, but seeing how he immediately rolled outside and then it was pretty much like a handicap match after that, it was just not a good sign. That, of course, being said, the Usos retained against Shinsuke their tag team titles, so they'll be moving on as champions still. We can report now, and like I said, since this is a few days on delay covering the event itself, we can report that Rick Boogs did undergo successful knee surgery today, so that's always exciting and good news, or not exciting rather, but just good in the sense that there's no major issues rather than, or anything like that rather. I believe it was a quad tear that he suffered, so he'll most likely be out 6 to 12 months, which is, that sucks, and it's so sad to see, but at least the surgery was successful, so we definitely wish him the best going forward, and just a steady recovery. You know, I know I've said in the past, I don't like saying a speedy recovery because I don't want guys or anyone for that matter to rush it. So definitely thoughts out to him, and just it's going to be interesting to see too what happens with Nakamura going forward, because he, prior to the tag team, he was the Intercontinental Champion, and he never defended the title, like, at all, for I don't even know how, I think it was like 6 months or something like that. I know at some point he had an injury, I think it was to his hand, if I'm not mistaken, but still, like, if he's gonna be injured for a lengthy amount of time, you need to do something with the title, or you should, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because neither the Intercontinental title nor the U.S. Championship were defended on WrestleMania itself, so there's that. But moving on, we got a couple of video packages, and I did want to mention before I move on, rather, that Michael Cole, before the tag match started, had mentioned that it was his 26th WrestleMania, which that stood out to me because, I mean, of course, we all knew that Michael Cole has been around forever, right? But when you hear it, that's his 26th WrestleMania, it's just amazing. I need to see how long he's officially been with the company, because he started off as a backstage announcer, and then kind of worked his, I guess, way up from there. So I imagine he's probably been with the company at this point, 28, 29 years, if not 30. So shout out to Michael Cole. You know, he gets a lot of shit, but he does so well at his job, and I think he adds a lot to the product. In my opinion, he's the voice of WWE at this point. So just shout out to Michael Cole for this being his 26th WrestleMania. That's pretty cool to hear. But the next matchup we had was Drew McIntyre versus Happy Corbin with Madcap Moss at ringside. I am not going to be spending too much time on this match because, like I have said before, I cannot believe we are still going on with this. I think we actually officially started with this whole feud at Survivor Series, and to think that this is a feud that they have continued for that length of time is mind-blowing. If you guys have been enjoying it, kudos to you and good for you. I am super happy for you. I'm just over it. I've been over it for months now, so nothing against these two guys. I personally am a big fan of both of them, but I'm ready and just so ready, I should stress, to see them both move on and do something else. A key moment during the match here was, of course, Drew McIntyre kicking out of the End of Days, which was the first time that anyone has kicked out of Corbin's finishing move. So that was pretty noteworthy. I don't know if that's a good sign, or what kind of sign that is for Corbin going forward, rather, or unless they just wanted to give McIntyre something big, I guess. But I hope that's not a bad sign for Corbin, because, like I said, I'm a big Corbin fan. I hope they maybe just, I don't know, I'm not over the Happy Corbin gimmick per se, but I don't know, I just want him to be taken a little bit more seriously, because I think that they could definitely utilize him as not a main event heel, but a definite upper card heel, I think, in my opinion. So I don't know, maybe I'm just a biased Corbin fan or whatever, because I know he definitely gets a lot of heat out there for whatever reason. But hey, and I'm not saying he's the best out there, but in WWE world, and for his character and all the variations he's gone through, I think he's definitely underrated in that aspect. But the other, I don't know if noteworthy is the proper term, but interesting little scenario that happened, and that's probably selling it short. McIntyre, of course, has his sword, which I think is obnoxious that he's still carrying the sword. I think the whole thing is obnoxious with the sword. Like, I just never been a fan of the sword. I can appreciate the sentiment with the name and that being his mother's name and all that good stuff. And even if that is a family heirloom or whatever, which I don't think it is, I'm pretty sure I read or heard somewhere that Vince gave him the sword, so it's not even like someone from his family gave it to him. I don't like the sword. It's just lame. You know, he's never going to hit anyone or slice anyone with the sword. And not that I'm obviously advocating for that, but it's just, what's the point? You know, it's just kind of obnoxious and it's massive. And how do they travel with this sword? Like, there's just so many questions that I have. But anyway, moving on, I'm spending way too much time on this already. He ended up slicing the first two ropes, of the three ropes surrounding the ring. Which was kind of terrifying and kind of, perplexing to me. So there was that. I don't know if it was family ringside or close friends or whatever. Maybe it was his wife, but he, after that, went ringside and celebrated with a few fans who were holding flags. So that was cool. And I'm happy for it. Again, like I said, I'm a fan of both guys, but ready for this to be over with. After that, we got a few more video packages, and this one was for the Mysterios versus the Miz and Logan Paul feud, which ended up being next. We had the Miz and Paul coming out there with pretty much matching gear, which is pretty cool. And I have said plenty of times here and on other shows that I didn't even know who the Paul brothers were. Obviously, I dabble on YouTube and stuff, but I've never really been the type to just sit there on YouTube for hours and just browse through videos and stuff like that. I don't know, the only time I use YouTube is for a specific thing that I want to look up. I don't know. And I'm not really like a YouTube personality person. Again, unless it's specifically wrestling related or I want to review show, something like that. But I don't know, not for someone just going out, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I don't go out there looking for, I guess, just regular personalities and watching people's everyday life. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge reality TV show fan, or I have been in the past. Haven't really sat down and watched any lately, but long story short, I didn't know who the Paul brothers were, and I've kind of shit on them in the past, but Logan Paul here and in this match, I even said on Twitter, he was fucking phenomenal, and so much props and credit and kudos, all that good shit to him. You can tell he put in the work and the training, and he's in phenomenal shape too. And I never realized the size of that guy either. He has great height to him, and his body, he's thick, dude is solid. So I could totally see him being a heel in WWE. I feel like he would be just someone, obviously, that the fans just want to hate, no matter how hard they try to make him a good guy. But hey, I'm not saying that this was a phenomenal match or anything like that, but he really did a good job. And so shout outs to him and all the training and work that he put into it. And of course, with The Miz being there, I think The Miz is the go-to guy for any Hollywood personality coming in. And rightfully so. The Miz is pretty solid in the ring. The Miz kind of reminds me, or I guess I should reverse that since The Miz has been around longer, but in my mind, Corbin and Miz are kind of similar in the sense that they are grossly underrated, and I think especially Miz, he gets so much shit, but because he's not phenomenal in the ring, right? He's not oh my god, 5-star classic or anything like that. But he's good, and he always has a solid match. There's never a shitty Miz match. It's just, okay, yeah, that was a pretty good match, and just carry on, you know what I mean? But this match was pretty good, and I was actually surprised that The Miz and Logan Paul got the W here. I'm curious to see what they end up doing with Dominic now that he did end up following up on that with Monday Night Raw. He ended up losing in quick fashion as well on Raw to The Miz, I believe. So my opinion, I think Dom needs to go down to NXT, and I think it'd be pretty cool, like I've mentioned in the past, to see him on NXT and to see what he can do down there. But again, I was surprised that The Miz and Logan Paul got the W here, and even more surprised to see The Miz turn on Paul. But what I was not surprised to see was the fans cheer The Miz after hitting the skull-crushing finale on Mr. Paul. Again, I don't think there's going to be anything WWE can do to get Paul cheered. And if they want to, and I'm saying Paul, I know that's his last name. His name is Logan Paul. But I think if they want to continue to have Logan Paul on their shows, you need to do it and keep him as a heel. He's just easy to hate, so let him. Let him be that guy, rather. And I think just one of the things that really stood out to me besides his athleticism was the facial reactions that he had, and just that one smite, like, just, oh, that smug look that he had, and that thing that he did with his tongue after I'm pretty sure it was right after the Three Amigos spot, which was perfectly done, and then the Eddie Guerrero frog splash off the top rope, and before he hit the frog splash, he did the little shimmy, so he did everything right, and I think in this match. So again, props to everyone involved for that matter, for what they were able to pull off here. We had a little bit more video packages after that, and again, if I miss like a video package here and there or something like that, like, forgive me, but this isn't like an in-depth. If this was immediately following WrestleMania, I would have gotten you guys, but we're a little after the fact at this point. But we did have Stephanie McMahon come out and just kind of thank everyone for being in attendance and for just being there and supporting WWE and for WrestleMania and all that good shit. She did end up introducing Gable Steveson to the fans who were there, and to me, it was just kind of awkward. Like, I don't know. He went to one side of the stage, held his arms up, went to the other side of the stage, held his arms up, went back to Stephanie, like, kind of, like, did, like, a nod to her, and then they went to the back. Like, I don't know. Like, I get that they're trying to just get his face out there and showcase that they have him signed, and he's supposed to be the future of the WWE going forward, but I don't know. For me, I'm just going to wait and see on this one. But the next actual match that we got was Becky Lynch versus Bianca Belair. And this damn near could have stolen the show. I think this was fucking phenomenal. If we didn't get the main event that we ended up getting, I would have absolutely loved to have seen this match, main event night 1. Becky Lynch, just phenomenal. She held her heel role so perfectly in this match and did everything that she needed to do for Bianca Belair. And I think I have myself, not on this pod and on WWE, the WWE podcast, who has been killing it in the charts lately, so shout out to them. I think they cracked the top 30 this week in the wrestling charts, so that's amazing. So shout out Matt and all the crews over there. But this match, or rather, like I said with Becky before I get into it, I think that her coming back as a heel was just so stupid on WWE's part, but I'm not going to say I was wrong or I take back my opinion on that, but I understand it a little bit more now, and I see if this truly was their whole mindset starting from SummerSlam through WrestleMania with Becky and Bianca, then kudos to them. And I will admit a little, I don't want to say fault, but I'll take a little bit of crow or whatever, right? But I'm ready to see Becky as a good guy again, you know, as a face, whatever you want to call him, you know, like I think it's just going to be so interesting to see what you do too with Becky after this. Do they go for the immediate rematch, which I don't think you're going to do, but I don't know. And I think Bianca may need a couple weeks to let that eye heal, because golly, like, if you haven't seen this match, or if you haven't seen like a gif or a picture or anything of Bianca's face, especially how she looked on Raw afterwards, like, that girl's whole eye, like a perfect fucking circle from the cheekbone, a little bit above the eyebrow, is just black and blue. Becky Lynch at one point in the match had gone for, I forget the exact name of the move itself, but essentially Becky hit a moonsault, a front flip. The way the move is supposed to be done, onto Bianca rather, but the way the move is supposed to be done, like, pretty much Becky's ass is supposed to land on Bianca's chest, and that's how we've seen it done in the past. Kind of like a Molly go round, right? I just don't know what Becky officially calls it. It's just escaping my mind. But I don't know. It was just the timing was slightly off, obviously. So Becky's foot ended up kicking Bianca just square in the eye. And you could see immediately that shit swelled up. But you would have never known. Like, Bianca, like, she reacted a little bit after the fact, but she just muscled through that shit like nothing happened. So that girl is a fucking beast. So shout out to Bianca. And I think this match is, God, man, this is probably my favorite women's match in quite some time, at least in the WWE world. Maybe in as a whole, in quite some time. There was just something about the layout and the story of the match, and I think just how both of them played their roles so well. It was just so beautifully told too, and I think it was completely different than Bianca and Sasha's match last year at WrestleMania, which I thoroughly enjoyed and loved as well. That one was a little bit more emotional, and it had a little bit more of like a good vibe feeling and like a sentimental feeling surrounding it, and it just had a little bit more built into it in that aspect, where this one was more about revenge and more about Bianca getting her just due. And you can tell Bianca was a different version of herself this year. She was more confident and was more sure of herself, or at least her character was. I'm not going to speak as her as a person, but you could tell her character was. And that was very cool to see. And it's just so clear that Bianca is the future of the women's division in WWE. And that's why I harp on the fact that they need to stop with the bullshit with like your Rhea Ripley's in the tag team division, right? And Shayna Baszler too. And I could go on and on, but you need to build your division back up, and not necessarily that those two in particular. Well, Shayna's a different story, but you need to have solid opponents. And if you have been focusing on them in different aspects and in different ways, you wouldn't kind of be left to wonder, like, okay, like where do we go from here, and who's really going to be like, what's the next 3, 4, 5 challengers lined up? You know what I mean? Like, what's your game plan for the next 3-6 months? So I'm definitely going to be interested to see if they go right to the immediate rematch with her and Becky, which wouldn't really be surprising to me if they do, and especially if the next PLE is going to be WrestleMania Backlash. If they keep that WrestleMania name built in there like that, I could definitely see this being a rematch going forward. After that, we had another video package that was aired, and then we had a group of singers line up on the stage, which ended up being for Seth Rollins, which was pretty cool. He came out in this, it was pretty dope, I'm not gonna lie. It was like lace gear and a robe that was black and blue. The whole getup was just pretty cool. So if you haven't seen it, definitely seek out some pictures or a video of that too. And side note, if you haven't noticed, whenever Seth and Becky both have matches or segments, they seem to be back to back and follow each other, which has just always been an interesting note to me. But Seth was left waiting in the ring for his opponent, which at that point we still weren't quite sure who it officially was going to be. The lights broke down in the arena, and then there was just one spotlight on Seth for a little bit of time. After that, the spotlight itself turned off, went silent. We got some pyro that went up from the ramp all the way to the stage itself. And the next thing you know, we heard the beginning of Cody Rhodes' entrance theme. Wrestling has more than one royal family. His music broke, and I'm sure you guys have seen it by now if you're listening to this podcast, but the whole display and the whole pageantry and the whole pomp and circumstance of Cody Rhodes' entrance at WrestleMania and how they presented him on WrestleMania itself in the match, and then following up on Raw, the interviews that he's done, the merchandise, fucking standing ovation for WWE and Cody Rhodes and everyone involved in that. You know, as fans, we shit on WWE a lot, and rightfully so a lot of times, for decisions that they do, or they make rather, and for stuff that they change unnecessarily, and just and maybe I don't really know, you hear stories, right? Like, but who's to say if it really is the majority of the creative writing team, for instance, or if it is just Vince who wants things his way, and the majority of the people think that we should be, like common sense shit, I'm not going to get too involved in that for the show here, but whoever, and obviously it's going to be Vince at the end of the day, but whoever was involved in all of the surroundings with this, and just the entrance itself, and the handling of Cody Rhodes, the character, bravo. it has been perfect so far. Now, of course, we do still have Cody Rhodes set to return tomorrow night on SmackDown as well, so it'll be interesting to see if he interacts directly with Roman Reigns or if he just comes out to address the fans there. So that's definitely gonna be cool to see how they carry him going forward and how quickly they dive into the title picture. But we're gonna, like I said, get into that in a little bit more in depth after we get over the WrestleMania card. But I think the fact that they kept everything about Cody the same was just what they should have done, like it's, and I sit here and say that in a lot of ways it should be like, well, duh, like of course they would have done that, but I think a lot of us were kind of concerned that they were going to change him or tweak some things and change his music, and if they do end up changing it in the future, we'll talk about it then, but right now I'm enjoying what they've done and the way that they displayed him. I love everything about it. I love the logo, the presentation of his name, just the fonts, just everything. It's just dope. And even the merchandise that they released for him, it's not that far off from his AEW merchandise and the logos and shit that they had. And he even has a shirt that has a variant of Pharaoh on there, his dog. So it's just been pretty cool to see what they've done with him so far and what they've allowed him to do. And he himself has mentioned that he signed a multi-year, I believe it was in his Raw promo, that he signed a multi-year deal with WWE. So, and again, multi-year could just be 3 years, or multi-year could be 3 to 5. So we'll, of course, probably get some more information as time goes by over that. But I think a lot of the praise here should also go to Seth Rollins, because he literally carried this whole program himself and the build going up into the match itself. So just everything that Seth did in the weeks building up to it, the match itself, and then what transpired on Raw, him coming out in that that pink suit. And actually, I didn't even hate the pink suit. Thinking back on it, it was of course obnoxious, but that's what makes it kind of great. So, and of course, only Seth Rollins can pull that off. But having him come out on Monday Night Raw, and again, I'm kind of blending in both shows for time purposes, guys, so I hope you don't mind. But having him come out on Raw, not interrupting Cody, but kind of right as Cody was wrapping up his promo, Cody actually ended up opening up Monday Night Raw, which I was a little surprised by, but again, I'm pretty sure I predicted that here, and if I did, I'm pat him on the back for that. But the Cody Rhodes promo, which I'm not going to get into too much here, but having Seth come out after that and kind of shake hands and no bullshit happened, no, blindside, no kick in the nuts, nothing like that, just a fair shake of the hands, and then Seth leaves and Cody Rhodes' music hits. Very well done. So far so good. And the match itself was great. One of my favorite moments of the match was towards the beginning of it. I think I forget the move itself that they did. I think it was just like a regular arm drag that Cody did to Seth Rollins when they were still, like I said, in the beginning part of the match, just kind of feeling each other out. He did the arm drag to Seth Rollins, and out of nowhere, he gets this look on his face and does the cartwheel, and then the trademark Stardust hand movement. Please go out and check that GIF if you haven't seen it. It was just, I laughed my ass off when I saw that, but of course, no surprise here. Cody Rhodes got the W. Again, I'm just so pleased with what they've done with Cody so far, and so far so good. After that, we had the Hall of Fame class of 2022 come on stage and kind of just acknowledge the crowd itself, and of course that including The Undertaker, who was inducted into this year's class. In his Hall of Fame speech the night before, he had mentioned never say never at the end, so I don't know, guys. It felt like the end, and maybe that's just like the wrestler thing to say nowadays, but we'll see about that. But I haven't seen the full Hall of Fame show itself, or Undertaker's speech for that matter, so I can't really talk too much on that quite yet. But I think it goes without saying, no one probably there were very few people are more deserving than the Undertaker to be in the Hall of Fame, so that like I said, pretty much goes without saying. But I'm not going to get too much into the Hall of Fame, like I said, until I actually see the show. But just all due respect to everyone who was inducted, big fan of a lot of I don't want to say everyone, but a lot of the individuals who were inducted. So just shout out to them. You know, after your career, you deserve to get your flowers. You know what I mean? And ideally, you get them while you're still physically here on this earth. But as long as I think your career is respected and at least acknowledged, and I think with in the WWE world, right? If you're gonna have the Hall of Fame, you need to induct the right people into it. So I think they're making up for lost time here, or at least trying to. So like I said, I heard the Hall of Fame was a good event as well. But I'm going to try to maybe watch that tonight and maybe throw that into another show that I do on the weekend, like a weekend review type thing. The next official matchup we had on the card was Charlotte Flair, your SmackDown Women's Champion, versus Ronda Rousey, which was, of course, your Women's Royal Rumble match winner this year, who elected to face Charlotte Flair for whatever fucking reason. We still don't really know. All since led to Becky Lynch, and I'm not going to beat that dead horse, which I know I have in the past, but it's just still... I don't know. I should shut up at this point because I love the match that we got from Becky and Bianca earlier in this on this card. I was gonna say on this night, but I don't know, man. It still didn't make sense to me. The story just felt forced. This match was not great. It was kind of. I'm so happy this wasn't the main event for WrestleMania Night 1. You know, like. I will admit that I was wrong, and with the way, I'm not going to say wrong again, I'll hold off on that, but at least with this match, and I think a notable thing that kind of stood out to me too during, or at least during the entrances rather, was neither of them had an elaborate entrance. Charlotte didn't get a helicopter entrance or anything elaborate. I mean, she got her pyro, and Ronda got her pyro as well, but it wasn't anything crazy. No Joan Jett for Ronda Rousey or anything like that. So very interesting kind of tidbit there, because we have, like, for instance, Bianca Belair got a marching band. Seth Rollins got his group of singers on stage. So they definitely had their moments. So I was kind of surprised that neither of them got it. And, cool. They don't need to get it every year. I think key people should get it, and I think when key people get it, it kind of stands out more, and maybe that's kind of why I noticed it more here too. And again, nothing major, it was just kind of something that stood out to me. But what I was surprised by was Charlotte Flair retaining her title and defeating Ronda Rousey, and I think this was around 18 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. There was apparently during the WrestleMania event itself, some news on Twitter that Ronda Rousey was threatening to leave the event itself before the match was even like actually about to happen. So there was question if the match was going to be pulled from the show, which I still don't know where the fuck that came from. I actually forgot about it until I sat down reviewing my notes here. But yeah, I have no idea what that was about, but obviously she was still there. So we'll see what ends up happening after this, and if kind of like what I said with Lynch and Belair, if they end up going to a rematch here, because we had a few moments during the match where Ronda technically should have won, with the whole referee being down and her getting a visual tap out from Flair, but that was, of course, when the referee was down, like I said. I was just kind of surprised, too, with the way that the match ended, now thinking back on it as well, with Flair just winning the match with a boot to the head and just pinning her 1, 2, 3, which, I like, makes sense, but you just don't really see that nowadays with just that move being it. So it was I'm not going to say this match sucked, but it wasn't great. You know what I mean? It wasn't phenomenal. I think their Survivor Series match was much better. And again, I know that had different rules than the match itself. I think it was no DQ. I just know they have weapons involved. I forget the exact stipulation on the match, but I'm pretty sure was it no DQ, or did she just... Now I'm confusing myself, but whatever. You guys know what I mean. That match was much better. Now I'm going to go back and rewatch it. But after that, we got another video package, and then they mentioned that WrestleMania next year is going to be held on April 1st and 2nd at SoFi Stadium. So there's that. Maybe I'll be going to that one next year. That's the tentative plans. We'll see how the year plays out and what the card ended up looking like and things at that point. But the main event ended up being the KO show, with, of course, your host being Kevin Owens coming out in his wrestling gear, hosting the show with his guest being Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, this is where I will, again, I don't know if admitting that I was wrong is the proper way to go about phrasing it, but I was kind of torn with having this in the main event, but I will give myself a little bit of leeway here and say that I did say if it was going to end up being a match, then of course throw it in the main event, which it did end up being. Of course, we started off with Kevin pretty much shitting on Texas still and kind of rehashing that and just shitting on Austin and just what you expected, right? Austin came out. I love that he ended up going back to the back and then came back out on his four-wheeler, which is just so great. But that ended up leading to a match, and I was shocked. One of the more shocking moments in the match itself was when Austin took a suplex on the concrete. Like, dude, like, you don't need to do that. And so the fact that he did is just insane. So thank you, Austin. You don't need to do that. But I'm not going to go, like, a specific breakdown for this, but the things that Austin did to his body in this match for us was just beyond what we expected. And this is one of those things where WWE over-delivered, and shout out to them, and big props to them. And like I said, we shit on WWE when needed, but we need to give props when needed too. And this is definitely one of those moments. They over-delivered here. Austin over-delivered here in this main event. I don't necessarily want this to be a continued thing for him. I think this was cool for what it was, and I'm super fucking happy for Kevin Owens and what this ended up being for him, and this is going to be a night that he's never going to forget. And I'm so happy that he ended up re-signing with WWE, and that led to this moment for him. So yeah, just night one ended up being a very, very solid and good and entertaining show. One of those shows where you can definitely go back, in my opinion, and throw it on and rewatch it whenever you feel like it. You know, this wasn't one of those cards where I feel like it was like a dud until the main event or anything like that, or you had to skip the majority of the matches and there's only like one or two that were good. I think the majority of this show was pretty solid, so I think they definitely delivered on night one. And that definitely got me excited to look forward to night two, technically, and part two of the WrestleMania event. And speaking of night two, we will, of course, pick up with WrestleMania Night 2 here. The show itself started off with Jesse James Decker singing America the Beautiful. Again, never really heard of Jesse James Decker either, but, you know, whatever, it was what it was. We got another video package from Mark Wahlberg hosting just a WrestleMania video package, rather. But pretty cool to see. But the show itself started off with Triple H. He made his way to the ring with his signature entrance, the water spit, and all that good stuff. He stopped once he got to the ring before getting inside and, of course, doing the water spit. He hugged what seemed to be his three daughters. I'm not sure who the other individuals were, but they were definitely his three daughters that he hugged first, which was pretty cool. And we don't really get to, or I don't know if we have really seen them on WWE TV like that. So that was pretty cool to see, and pretty cool that he allowed us to kind of open up to us with his family. I think between that and the interview that he did with Stephen A. Smith, it's been pretty cool to see. He came out there and just kind of absorbed the moment, and the fans chanted, "Thank you, Hunter," which was, of course, rightfully deserved. He kept it sweet, or short and sweet, rather. I thought we were maybe going to get like a full interview or promo from him, but he just really came out there and said, "I just wanted to come out here to say thank you and to show you my love in the best way I know how. Welcome to WrestleMania." Of course, he did his signature Triple H voice there with the welcome to WrestleMania, and then the pyro went off, and then the show kind of kicked off from there. But definitely very cool to see. He did end up leaving his wrestling boots in the ring as kind of like a show of respect, which is the wrestler way to kind of just acknowledge that your time in the ring is done, which is kind of just really bittersweet again to see. I obviously referenced that when the interview broke, so we're not going to get too much into that, but I love that we opened WrestleMania with that, and he kicked off the show, rather. So yeah, just I was really, really stoked to see that. But the first actual match that we got on the show was the Raw Tag Team title match, which had your champions being RK Bro, Randy Orton, and Matt Riddle, defending against the Street Profits, of course being Montez Ford and the Angelo Dawkins versus Alpha Academy, which consists of Chad Gable and Otis. this match was very good, very, very good, and the ending to it was pretty dope. It's always amazing to see the creativity for the RKO shots and moments during the match, and this was no different. Right before the ending, Riddle that was forward on the top turnbuckle, getting ready to hit, I believe, probably a frog splash on Randy Orton, if I'm not mistaken, who was in the ring. Riddle saw that from the outside, jumped onto the apron, springboarded onto the top rope, looked forward right in the face, and hit an RKO from the top rope into the ring. Just amazing. Then that led to Chad Gable coming from the opposite side and Randy Orton catching him and hitting the RKO to pick up the victory. I'm pretty sure I predicted that RK Bro rather, was going to retain here, and they did, which I'm definitely excited to see. After that, they had Gable Stevenson come in the ring. Yeah, I'm not really going to get into too much of that because a lot has kind of broken from then, and I personally don't know too much about it, so I'm not going to even really address that until I've kind of read up on it myself. But there was that. The match itself, though, was pretty cool and pretty fun, I should say. So it was a pretty good opener, and I'm happy that RK Bro retained the titles, and I'm looking forward to seeing how long this team stays together. I don't know if a lot of us predicted that they would be together at this point. I think I even maybe called for Randy Orton and Matt Riddle having their match at WrestleMania against each other, or thought that they were going to pull the trigger on that a few months ago, but they haven't, and I'm kind of excited to see how long they stretch this out and to see where they go from here. But the next match that we had was the one that I was least looking for. I'm not going to say least, but one that I was not really looking forward to, just because you guys know how I feel about Omos. And again, speaking of Omos, now that we know what happened on Raw, I get why they are separating MVP and Bobby Lashley, but because it's pretty obvious at this point that Lashley's a face at this point. And Omos definitely needs a mouthpiece, and who better than MVP for him? But I just love Lashley and MVP, man. Like, the Hurt Business was dope as fuck, and they prematurely cut that loose way too soon, in my opinion. And I don't know, the whole vibe and the look of Lashley and MVP was just was cool to me. So to see that they're officially over kind of sucks, but what I was happy about was that Bobby Lashley got the victory here at WrestleMania against Omos in, I think, 6.5 minutes or something like that. Lashley ended up hitting a suplex at one point on Omos, which was insane. The dude is just unbelievable what he can do, and his entrance here was pretty cool as well. So again, you guys know I'm a big fan of Lashley's entrance in general, but what they did here for WrestleMania was pretty dope too. So shout out to, again, everyone who was involved in that. But I'm very, very happy that Lashley ended up getting the victory here. I think not that he needed it more than Omos, but the focus should remain on Lashley, and Lashley should always be a big deal. So I think if you would have had him lose to Omos, it would have been a huge loss. No pun intended. But moving on from that match, we have the clusterfuck of Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn in an Anything Goes match. This match wasn't terrible. And I just say clusterfuck because there was so much weird and random shit that happened in this match. This is one of those matches where you're either okay with it and you know it is what it is, or you're embarrassed by it. To me, I was a little embarrassed by it I'm not going to say embarrassed by it. That's a little too strong. Maybe there's three ways. You could be somewhere in the middle, and I think I was somewhere in the middle. I don't know, like, I get it, and I'm happy Sami Zayn enjoyed his match, and it's very close to him, like, close to his heart, and I'm totally fine with that, and I'm happy for him, but I don't know, like, it just got to be a little bit too much. Like, the giant mousetrap, again, it was an excuse to keep Sami pinned. I don't know, it was just too much, but we had a wee man sighting. He ended up hitting not a suplex, but a body slam onto Sami Zayn, which I'm not gonna lie, I did chuckle at. But this match was what it was. It had a table, a regular table with mousetraps glued to the table, just bizarre shit, and shit that you would expect from a match like this. So Johnny Knoxville ended up getting the victory here because Sami was trapped in this giant mousetrap and couldn't escape. So there's that, guys. The next match that we had was the women's tag team title match. We had your champions, of course, being Queen Zelina and Carmella, defending against Sasha Banks and Naomi versus Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan versus Shayna Baszler and Natalya. This match was okay. This ended up being much better than I expected. This was another that kind of fell into that category. I'm not going to get too deep into this one, but I was surprised. I wasn't surprised that Sasha Banks and Naomi ended up picking up the W here and are your new women's tag team champions. But I was surprised to really sit down and think that, damn, like this is the first match that Sasha Banks has won at WrestleMania. And, well, I shouldn't say I sat down and thought about that. I read that and I was like, holy shit, that's so right. That's insane to me, like the fact that this is her first win at WrestleMania is just kind of bizarre. Not really sure what that's about. I'm sure that wasn't the plan, like, oh, Sasha's going to lose her first X amount of WrestleMania matches, but it's just kind of weird when you think about it, right? She's Sasha freaking Banks, so there's that. We had a couple more video packages after that, and then we had the Dallas Cowboys stars. I think it was Micah Parsons was the first one, and I know the other guy was definitely Ezekiel Elliott. I know who he is. I thought that there was a third person, but maybe not. I was trying to skim through my notes here, but yeah, it was just Micah Parsons and Ezekiel Elliott who were in the fans there, and that was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see them. I don't know if they were out there for the entire show, but it's dope to see actual athletes. And I say that because it's a lot of times like they'll try to bribe celebrities and stars and just whatever in WWE's brain is their version of a celebrity, or anyone who has any type of notoriety they'll try to invite to the shows. I've read and shit like that, but to see these guys out there was pretty cool. I'm sure they definitely don't need to be there. They don't need the money or any shit like that, so it was just pretty cool to see. But the next actual match that we had was AJ Styles and Edge. Edge had a pretty cool entrance. Not really sure if that's going to be something that we see on a weekly basis, and I hope not, because it's cool to kind of save big entrances for that for WrestleMania. But AJ Styles, when he made his way to the ring, he had a random cut on his cheek. I don't know what happened at what point. I don't know if either he hit his face on something, or maybe he punched himself in the face during his entrance, or I don't know what happened. But he was definitely bleeding on his way to the ring. It was very noticeable. So I'm not really sure what happened there either. But the match itself was very good. I don't really know what I expected from this match, but it delivered. It's one of those matches where I want to go back and rewatch, because I was a little distracted during this match and it was a little lengthier than I expected it to be. It definitely went over 20 minutes. So I need to go back and really rewatch the whole match itself, but the gist of this match was kind of what you expected. The ending, of course, was kind of surprising in my opinion, though, with having Damian Priest just randomly show up out there. We did get a follow-up on that on Monday Night Raw, and it looks like they're going to be starting either a partnership, or it's going to turn into a faction with additional people being added later on. But at least as of right now, we have Edge kind of being a mentor to Damian Priest and kind of taking him under his wing and kind of forming a partnership there. So we'll see how that plays out going forward. But that, of course, distracted AJ Styles long enough for Edge to counter the phenomenal forearm with the spear, which is a pretty cool finish. And Edge, like I said, ended up getting the victory here. But we'll see like I said, if it ends up being like a full-blown faction, if it's going to be like a new formation of like a version of like the Brood from back in the day, or what it ends up being, or if it's just going to be the two of them. But it's pretty cool pairing, and I'm going to kind of take a wait and see approach on this one too. The next match we had was Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods versus Sheamus and Ridge Holland. The most notable thing to me was that Kofi Kingston and Woods came out in Big E-inspired gear, which was pretty cool, and a shout out to Big E. So very, very cool to see. The match itself was like barely 2 minutes. I don't even know if it was. This was rescheduled from night one because they ran out of time, and if your plan was to go less than 2 minutes, then I don't know how you didn't have time, but it was what it was. There is nothing really to break down at this point with that match. But After that, we got another video package just kind of recapping Cody Rhodes' return at WrestleMania from the night before. And then we had a shot of Roman Reigns' locker room door because earlier in the night we had saw a clip of Brock Lesnar's locker room door, so they're kind of following that up with Roman Reigns. And then we got another graphic of the Hall of Fame class of 2022 inductees from the night before. Undertaker ended up making his entrance again on the night 2 and just kind of took another bow and waved to the fans for night 2 as well, and just another endorsement and kind of like another thank you, a mutual respect type thing from both sides with that. After that, we had one of the things I was looking forward to the most, rather, for WrestleMania, which may sound crazy, but it was Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory. Pat got a dope entrance, by the way. He had the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders coming out, which was fitting, obviously, with them being in Dallas. Part of me was kind of surprised they didn't go for, like, the Indianapolis cheerleaders, but, whatever, no big deal. Pat made his way to the ring. His entrance was dope, though. His music was Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, which was so fucking cool. The match itself with him in Theory was amazing. Like, and I say amazing, like, wasn't like a Matt classic, right? Like, don't get me wrong. But for what Pat McAfee, his experience level, and for that matter, Theory's as well. Theory, of course, being the veteran in the match, but with McAfee not being an actual wrestler and only having very limited experience with 2 matches under his belt, this was a very good match, and Pat McAfee is just stupid athletic. Like, it's unreal the stuff that he is able to do at this point. And I should say, too, that Vince McMahon was accompanying Austin Theory to the ring as well, and he had made his entrance earlier also, so he was already at ringside throughout the match itself and standing near the commentators. The match itself, like I said, Pat McAfee ended up picking up the victory here, defeating Austin Theory. After the match, McMahon was not happy, had some words with Theory on the outside. Pat apparently provoked... Pat was sitting on the top turnbuckle on the other side of the ring and was getting mouthy with Vince. Vince didn't take too kindly to that and provoked... they were kind of provoking each other, so Vince finally got into the ring, took off his jacket and his button-down shirt, just in a tank top and showing his muscles there, and had an impromptu match, him versus Pat. This was bless Pat McAfee's heart, like, and bless in the fact that he was able to pull off the selling that he did for Vince, because it was just Vince is just not the most athletic guy out there, and it's just so funny to see. It wasn't even a match, but Vince ended up getting the victory here after Theory was able to knock Pat McAfee down and pretty much do that spot where you grab both of your opponent's feet and pull him so his midsection, his groin, is, slammed into the turnbuckle, that type shit. So Pat couldn't get up after that, so that led to Vince getting the victory there. After that, they were kind of fucking with Pat in the ring. That led to Austin making a surprise return for another quick kind of just interaction here and another sign off to the fans, and kind of closing the chapter on his feud with McMahon. And, a lot of people have... So, before I say that, there was, of course, they had their beer drinking moment where Austin toasted to Vince, and Vince actually drank a good amount of the beer. I was kind of surprised with how much he drank of it, and he actually acknowledged that it was pretty good, so I still want to try some of the beer myself, but a lot of people have shitted on Vince's sell job or lack thereof of the stunner from WrestleMania this year, and in my opinion, it's so perfect and it's so fitting, right? If you think about the first stunner that Vince has ever taken or had ever taken from Austin on Raw, I forget the exact date. It looked shitty. It was horrible. Like, Vince, it was just like a wet noodle. He just kind of like, it was just horrible. So the fact that one sucked, and then the way I'm pretty confident in saying that this is going to be the last stunner that Vince ever takes. And for him for it to just look so shitty at this point, and for God's sakes too, the dude's like 76 years old, so cut him some slack, you know what I mean? But I think whether it was a 20-year difference from the first stunner until to this ending stunner, the last stunner that Vince is most likely going to take, if it had just been 10 years, 5 years, like, Vince is just not athletic. So what do you really expect? It was perfect for me. But I love this whole segment. After that, Stone Cold rather, called Pat McAfee into the ring to celebrate and have some beers with him. They cheered, did the normal salute. Pat started drinking, and then Austin hit him with a stunner, and Pat sold the fuck out of that stunner, and it was just, again, so well done. So very, very happy for Pat McAfee, and I think that whole segment was just perfect, and I hope that they capitalize on Pat McAfee's status, and the fans were so behind him. Like, he got such a great reaction from the second his music hit. Just the whole segment itself, like, just Pat is a fucking star, dude. Like, I am such a big fan, and if you're not, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. It is what it is, but how could you not like this dude and not respect what he's done? So after that of course led to your main event, which was the unification match, holding your WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns defending against the WWE Champion Brock Lesnar. This match did not end up going as long as I thought it was going to go, and a lot of people I've kind of heard have shit on this match too, or said that it was too finisher heavy or centric, and I get it, and maybe I did expect a little bit more brutality between the both of them and physicality, like just like an actual fight. But I think it was good. I don't think it was their best match that they've had against each other, but I think this was probably probably their best WrestleMania match against each other. But not surprising, Roman Reigns ended up defeating Brock Lesnar in a little over 12 minutes to become the unified WWE Universal Champion. So it'll definitely be cool to see what ends up happening going forward. And like I said, we do have Cody Rhodes slotted to make his debut, return, whatever you want to call it, again on SmackDown tomorrow night. So I'm definitely intrigued to see if he goes right towards Roman, or if he's just kind of still getting his feet wet and just making his appearances on both shows to kind of get that out of the way and then start like a side feud. But it really depends on what they want their SummerSlam match to be. And if they are banking on The Rock versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania next year, if they want the title to be involved, first of all, with that match. Because, obviously you don't need it, right? You can just have the story itself be the main factor there, and have maybe a Cody Rhodes be your champion going into WrestleMania next year. I don't know. It's definitely going to be fun to see how the journey plays out for the next less than 365 days to WrestleMania next year. But that was the WrestleMania event itself, WrestleMania 38 event. Like I said, to touch on the Cody Rhodes interview he did really quick here regarding his departure from AEW, he said that he chose to remain silent about his departure from AEW and that he was going to keep his word on that. He's not going to mention specifically. He mentioned that it was a personal matter between him and Tony Khan, and that he's not going to specifically mention what that was. If Tony Khan wants to mention it, that he can go right ahead and mention it, but that it wasn't anything relating to creative or money or anything in that respect. So again, until we know the truth, we don't really know if that's 100% accurate or not. It's interesting that he mentioned that if Tony Khan wants to speak on the personal matter, that Tony Khan can. So I doubt that's ever really going to happen. So unless Cody says something or someone else, we may never really know. But the fact that it was a personal matter and that they couldn't move past it is very interesting to me. But of course, he said that he still has nothing but respect for Matt, Nick Jackson, Kenny Omega, and he's rooting for Tony Khan. But that it was just pretty much time for him to move on, that he helped lay the foundation and start the revolution, and that he hopes and wishes them the best, and that they needed an alternative in the wrestling world, and that he still maintains that same opinion. But it was just time for him to move on, which is, another interesting choice of words. And Cody is very deliberate in what he says. I know sometimes in promos he has admitted, which is how I know, that he wishes he maybe wouldn't have said certain things in certain promos, but normally in his interviews, he's a little bit more calculated, and I'm sure with this one, he most definitely was. So it was just interesting that he said that, but another part of the interview, he had mentioned that Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, and Nick Khan, a very small circle of individuals. He told them that he truly believes he's the best wrestler in the world. And to go further with it, he doesn't think that there's a close second. But with that being said, there was an opportunity to prove that point specifically, and that's what he was most excited about. And he made it even more clear on Raw that he wants the championship, and that's his only goal, really, and that's what he's going to be fighting for. He wants the title that his father was never able to truly have. And I think that's a very beautiful and a cool story, and obviously one that's fitting for Cody Rhodes and who we all know his character to be. So it's gonna be, and that's why I said with the whole Roman Reigns thing, it's gonna be very intriguing to see if they start that tomorrow or they wait and play that out a little bit longer. But that is going to wrap up the show here today, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this and for downloading it and streaming it wherever you listen. We are going to be playing catch up, but that is at least the first part of the week for WWE. I will be coming back with another show in the next few days covering the second part of the week that's happened, with maybe a little bit of AEW Dynamite, a little bit of Rampage, depending on when I sit down to kind of record. Will depend on when the show has happened or not, but I hope you guys have a fantastic night, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.